Lovely to see you, and it's a real pleasure to have you back with us. Just a bit of background for our audience. We had Jyoti speak with us, I think it was in 2018 or 17, at our Tech for Britain event, which was an all-encompassing event about kind of people, culture and technology transformation in general. And we had a great presentation from Jyoti there. So it's a real pleasure to welcome you back, and I hope you're doing well this morning and this week.
Thank you. No, Chris, it's great to be back. So I'm looking forward to our conversation today. Yeah.
Good stuff. So this morning we've had two presentations, one from AstraZeneca and one from New Zealand, and a lot of kind of the topics that were touched on were about kind of remote work, employee experience, engagement, and new ways of working. Particularly, obviously, this chat's largely going to be down to kind of pandemic response with regards to that. So the first question this morning for you, Jyoti, is just how essential is it for businesses to be exploring new and innovative ways of working now due to the pandemic, but to ensure that ways of working also last beyond the crisis?
Yeah. So I think, very quickly, in my role right now, and that's why this chat is so relevant, is, I run our business in working with our clients to help them transform to win in the experience economy. And, I set up this as a new business with our teams and our leaders in EMEA, and I cover Europe, Middle East, India, and Africa. And the pandemic hit us in February, 2 weeks after we set up the business. So you can only imagine the amount of pivoting and, revisiting our plans and strategies that we had to do, which has been an adventure so far, and is going on. So coming back to your question, how important it is, I think it's the difference between survival and extinction, Chris. The topic of employee experience and engagement and, new ways of working and adapting, these conversations have been happening for a few years now, but they have been catalyzed with an urgency to act. That's the difference.
Yeah.
In the past 6 months, we have seen our clients double down, and including EY. So we have been running a very conscious employee listening program for 2 years now. And we've seen our clients double down on their requests for employee listening strategies and not engagement. So, the survey mentality, and for a good part of 2 decades, companies have been running employee engagement surveys with not much that has happened out of it. So that still exists, but they now understand that well-being and motivation drivers are more multidimensional and interconnected, right?
Yeah.
And what we're also seeing is that in many instances, this topic is being not encompassed as part of an ongoing transformation program. So it has its own place in the boardroom. And as I say, there's been this transition from it being an agenda item to a top-down execution imperative. And the pandemic has exposed what hasn't been working, right? Yeah. And the smarter organizations are using it as an opportunity to course correct and to survive beyond the pandemic and thrive in, what we are getting used to in the new normal. So it's absolutely critical if organizations have to continue attracting good talent and, offering the service that they want to their consumers.
Nice, that's really good. And then the next question is about kind of more EY internally and how EY was kind of prepared to deal with the pandemic. I've got a few friends that work for EY, so kind of understand beforehand how the workplace worked with regards to flexible working, remote working, hot desks, that kind of thing. But we're in a position where the organisation was ready to deal with the business extremities that the pandemic has created. So when I ask that, it's kind of with reference to remote work, communications, even security, collaborations, etc.
Yeah. So, as you say, you have friends working at EY, so, largely as an organization that supports flexible working and client-facing travel. It's a business necessity. We were fairly well equipped, right? But we were, at least in EMEA, we were in the midst of an organization-wide deployment of Microsoft Teams rollout, So we went from Skype to Microsoft Teams. And when we were at the first epicenter of the pandemic, the deployment had just like it was midway, and I saw that within 2 weeks, the deployment was accelerated to completion, because that was the only way we could, collaborate with each other, because, one fine day we were just not able to meet your colleagues. So that for me, and it was quite encouraging. The speaker before me was talking about these large scale, organization changes. We are 300,000 plus employees in 100 plus countries. That's pretty large.
Yeah.
So what I saw is that the pandemic thrust upon us again that urgency to adapt to remote working, not being a choice. I think that's where the rubber hit the road for us.
Yeah.
It's not a choice. It's what you got to do. And as leaders, we were tasked with an onslaught of challenges. So let me give you a few examples. Doing a pitch 100% remote, huge challenge. Often we have pitch rehearsals. Sometimes I'm meeting with team members for the first time before going into a client pitch, building new relationships with, net new clients, or a conflict management, both internal and external. And these are all situations where the human touch and the in-person interaction is key to the outcome. So we had to learn. We still are learning to respond, refine, reflect, and repeat. And most of my days still are like being in an adventurous sport 24/7. And things like checking in on your people, it was important more than ever. And as well as a self-acknowledgement from leaders, that we are human as well. And that's important, because in order to respond to a crisis, you need a certain frame of mind and heart to do that. Some things that I very actively started practicing, and I'm quite a firm practitioner of, discipline for whatever contributes to balance in your life. It could be, a morning Tai Chi practice, or a meditation, or just a walk in the park.
Yeah.
So I encouraged my teams to put breaks in their calendar, and I practiced them. So if they came with a meeting, if it was not an urgency, and again, not everything can be an urgency, even when we are in a crisis. So this is stepping back and saying, what really needs handling. And I think the time until June was really challenging, as it was, still a looming uncertainty with a fair hope we will be out of it soon. And I think we will be. But as you can tell from where we are right now, especially in the UK, it's here to stay for a little bit. And I think we need to look at it as a marathon instead of a sprint.
Yeah, that's a really good answer. And then you kind of touched on employee infrastructure there, and the implementation of Microsoft Teams.
Yeah.
How much focus was there on the infrastructure prior to COVID? And you said it was rolled out in 2 weeks, but how much has the focus accelerated since that? Has there been more technology or tools onboarded that, as we've evolved through the pandemic, there's an understanding that we need, X, Y, Z. So, EY as an organization, have they implemented more digital technologies and tools? And how has that kind of evolved since the Microsoft Teams rollout, if there has been more implementation?
Yeah, so I'm gonna respond to this question both from an EY perspective and an outside-in perspective of what we are seeing and working with our clients.
Yeah.
That's okay. So, there have been, at various points of self-reflection, there has been this palpable feeling personally for me, and I see it in my teams, is that we are in this together. So as consultants who help clients tackle challenges, we were going through the exact same challenges at the same time as our clients. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And there was no time to lose. So from an infrastructure perspective, we are quite blessed to be working in an organization where we are fairly robust and have, ergonomically designed and engaging workspaces. Now, I use the term workspace and not workplace. But we were quite determined about the need, whenever the governmental regulations allowed us to return to a physical return, for a safe physical return. So I know that our IT and facilities teams have worked incredibly hard for a phased return of our people. And in London, at least, and I think in many other offices across the UK and Europe, are starting August, September, we had a phased, safe physical return of our people. And that it was a different dimension, right? It was around how are you gonna ensure social distancing, how are you gonna ensure which floors open, which floors closed. People had to book the desks that they were working at. And what was interesting for me to see is, and quite humbling, is that I've seen so many of my colleagues and team members move, because maybe, especially in London, maybe you were in shared apartments and didn't really expect for 3 people to be on calls the whole day.
Yeah.
It's been a very disruptive phase in many of the people that I know in their lives, where they're having to make different lifestyle choices. So from that perspective, we are and our clients go through that. Now, one thing that we did do is by April, and I was so impressed with the work our teams did, is that we created a detailed framework and an execution path that, just for the first time, I'll use a consulting jargon, a twin gear approach. And I will limit this to this response is, so the first gear was on planning and executing a safe physical return, both for ourselves and our clients, and we learned by deploying it. And the second gear was reimagining how things will get done and how organizations will take care of their people in the new set of circumstances that we find ourselves in. And you mentioned the evolution of digital technology. So the second thing also we did was we accelerated our future of work solutions. We already had a solution which we call as bricks, bytes, and behaviors. So bricks referring to the physical workspaces, bytes, the digital workspaces, and behaviors, what are the prerequisites and the intersection of behavior and the denominators of success in this hybrid working model. That's a term which is now floating around, that we as EY need to continue to service our clients, and that our clients need to continue to service their people and their consumers. So a lot of change, but I think it's been an interesting journey. So
so much change. It's crazy. And we've got a question coming from the audience and kind of follow up to that. How do you replace the human interaction when face-to-face is now via Teams, Zoom, etc., and maintain that same level of trust and familiarity?
Yeah, that's as you know, it's a very good question, and I think, if I may, that refers to the whole hybrid working model, right? And when I started my career 17 years ago, I feel like I've always been in a hybrid model, as a consultant. But I appreciate that so many of our clients and people that we work with, for them, it's a paradigm shift, To answer the question, how do you maintain the same level of familiarity? I think the first thing you have to be aware, very important, is don't be in the illusion that you are connected just because you're Zooming or Teaming every single day. So what I do with my teams is I do no agenda. So we don't have the option to meet in person, right? So that's a given. So the first thing is acknowledge that that's not a choice you have right now, and make peace with it, Then I do things like no agenda meetings, where, especially with my core team, we're not talking about work. We are, I honestly don't have any mandates that you have to have your video on. So that's one way where I feel I personally also get very exhausted just having my video on the whole time. I don't really have much of a choice. That's one. I think second, there are a number of techniques that I've used in my career where we play a lot of games. On Fridays, we actually do have bring your own beer meetings. So I do have it in my hand if it's after 6 o'clock. And again, this is with my core teams, but these are some of the things that we've seen have been useful. And I think another thing is, I personally, say example, most of my family is in India, and I've seen myself and other teams doing daily calls. Like I would normally talk to my family over the weekend, but giving them that space, that, because as consultants, we're probably working all the time, giving that space, that you have that personal break, and also encouraging them to practice the personal breaks. So I have team members where they'll say, oh yeah, okay, fine, I'll do a meeting at 12:30. I said, no, isn't that your lunch break? Let's look at an alternative slot. So I think it's more responsibility. I hope that helps, but I'm happy to take a photo.
That's a great answer, and I mean, I often see on LinkedIn the proof of that. I mean, you're always posting great team photos and sharing your experience, which is really nice to see, and it's quite clear that the people that you do meet are very kind of happy, and so that's great to see, and I see that quite a bit. So kudos to you for that, and that kind of ties in quite well to the next question about employee experience as well. So probably again, if you could answer this both from an EY perspective and then on the client side as well. But we often hear employee experience is kind of touted as the success of many modern businesses and organizations. And a lot of organizations are striving for achieving excellence in that area. How long has this been a part of your kind of work, and just how important is employee experience and engagement in achieving success in culture and productivity and leadership and everything?
Yeah, it's central, and I want to really start with what is experience. In its raw form, an experience is an interaction or an exchange that you have that leads to fulfillment of outcomes, and that may take the shape of aspirations, expectations, ambitions, anticipation, etc., right? And from my experience, in both my personal and professional life, the subject of experience has evolved. So yes, it's now called as employee experience. It may be called something else in 2 years' time or 5 years' time, right? And I have seen organizations travel from transforming systems, i.e. data repositories, from on-premise and hardware infrastructure to the cloud. And oh, by the way, user experience was an important factor, right? Now, that was one where smarter organizations, again, did not compromise upon. And there were other organizations who did compromise upon it, right? But again, at the heart of it, it was still not people experience, Organizations have been realizing with now the pandemic and a number of other social movements and the momentum that we have in the society on really getting to the heart of what matters to people as human beings, not as an employee, not as a contractor, as a human being. What do you need to have a fuller life? So they're realizing more seminally for the last couple of years that replacing systems does not translate to productivity. So let's put that to bed, right? Also, emerging technologies have already rendered transformations, even in the last 5 years, redundant, okay? And the pandemic, as I said, has made it existential. That's how important it is. So, and for me and a number of leaders, we've been doing these CEO and CHRO webcasts to understand what's happening within our clients' organizations. And it's as much a mental health crisis as a physical health crisis. And it's bringing those mental health conversations further into the mainstream on how we operate. So when you think about people experience, employee experience, you really have to think very carefully of all those factors. It's no longer about just creating a good candidate experience or a new hire or an onboarding experience. It's fundamentally about how much you care about the life that your people live inside and outside work. And within EY, we've recently, like last year, we completed a whole finance transformation organization-wide. We are almost complete with our HR systems transformation, and we embarked, as I said, on our employee listening and EX transformation 2 years ago, and it's a journey. And you don't get more complicated than we are as a complex organization that we are. And so lots of learnings from there. But yeah, it's very important, critical.
Nice, yeah, and with reference to the human side of things, it's a sentiment we hear quite a lot. So glad that you can kind of come back onto that as well, as it's so important. We talk about digital and technology transformation until the sun goes down, but at the end of the day, it's the human element that drives transformation. So glad that you picked up on that one there. So How do you go about exploring new ideas for the workplace and workforce with the intention of heightening experience and engagement? You must work with a lot of different organizations that initially have a very different approach or mindset with regards to that. How do you kind of go in and encourage new adoption and new thinking?
Yeah, well, I'm pretty sure you're not asking me to give you a consulting framework, because I'm not going to give you that. It all starts, consulting frameworks can get made, and it's different for different sectors and industries. Mm-hmm. But for me, and the way I go about my business, and I encourage my teams, is it begins with an honest intention. Mm-hmm. An honest intention to uncover and acknowledge what is not working. Mm-hmm. First. And there are signals all over the place. What matters is, are you willing to listen without any defenses? Yeah. Right? And it only starts there, with carefully understanding what employees value in your organization and amplifying it. Very often we see that organizations are too focused on what's not working. And I'm a big practitioner of energetic consciousness, and what you put energy in amplifies, right? So how about distributing your efforts and working on your strengths, mm-hmm. while you dissect the black holes? Because something is working, you have people working with you, right? Mm-hmm. So the first is the honest intention. You start with exploring that. Second is, the gentleman before me said, it's so important communicating at all levels that it's a shared responsibility. Mm-hmm. By leaders at every level and every single person in the organization. And then you take the aid of technology. So, for example, at EY, we've implemented the SAP Qualtrics platform that allows us to have something called as a mood monitor. Every Monday. So it's an anonymous, always on feedback, right? And every Monday there is a team within EMEA that looks at what people are feeling, thinking. And it's interesting that some of our earlier insights showed that the way somebody was feeling on a Monday depended so much on how their weekend had gone, mm-hmm. And that set the tone of their entire week. So you have to make sure that every single listening post, if I may use that term, that you have that you have access to, as long as you're open to it, you have to listen to it, and then you have to, analyze and mine what it's trying to tell you. But one thing is important also, and very clear, that there are no quick results. Mm-hmm. Okay? So let's not beat around the bush there. Mm-hmm. And employee engagement programs are not superheroes that will upturn distressing employee satisfaction, motivation, or retention numbers. Mm-hmm. It is a constant, persistent journey that has to be undertaken, mm-hmm. and it's important. We all see that it's important because all of us have different choices that we are making now, right? And I think that's the upside, if I may, of the pandemic, that it has led to more conscious living, I think, yeah. Or forcing us to live more consciously.
No, definitely. And then with that, how do you, if you go into an organization and there is, mass resistance to change, particularly from a leadership level, how do you kind of break down the that resistance and put the point across?
Yeah, it's not easy, mm-hmm. right? We have to start with, and I'm using this term very carefully, but you have to start with the maturity of the leadership on this particular topic. Okay. And that employee engagement is not just something that your internal comms and change team are responsible for. Mm-hmm. You need to sit on the CEO's desk. That's one. If it's not sitting on the CEO's desk, then we try to work with them, if there is space to work with them, to help them understand why it's important. And sometimes you need to correlate it with their top line growth or their bottom line growth. I think one thing which is very important, the reason I work with the Qualtrics platform, is that it's about correlating the what and the why of your business, Mm-hmm. So if you're having a high turnover, let's say, for example, in a particular section of your workforce, why is it happening? So instead of putting a bandage on the problem, mm-hmm. you have to figure out why it's happening. And I think more often than not, it takes time, but when you really show them the why, they start getting it.
Yeah.
So that's how we go about breaking barriers, but it's not an easy job.
No,
but yeah,
I can imagine. I can guess that's one of the biggest challenges that, often you might face. So I was just interested to kind of probe that a bit more.
Yeah.
So kind of finally wrapping up here, going back to remote work, and you've touched on kind of the hybrid workplace and workforce, and I think, in 2021, that's going to be very much the buzzword and the focus for a lot of organizations, particularly large organizations. But do you think remote work is going to become more normal as we edge out of the pandemic? Have organizations proved that it's possible? Those leaders that are maybe resistant to, changing kind of the model of the workforce, do you think they'll be convinced? And whenever it is that the pandemic, disappears, and hopefully that is soon, do you think organizations will revert to more of a hybrid model, or do you think we'll be returning to, 2019, for example, in terms of structure?
Yeah, I personally don't think that organizations will be returning to the 2019 status quo. So I think that remote working will become more normal. I think it depends on what the starting point of any organization was. If they were, completely, co-located for right reasons, adopt the hybrid model in the measures that work for you.
Yeah.
Is it achievable? Yes. Does the technology allow? Yes. But, as I said, don't be in the illusion that because you're Zooming, you're connected. We are human beings, So as long as we are being conscious of the choices we are making, and we don't enslave ourselves that just because, technology allows it, we should do it, it's fine. And being conscious of those choices that we are making, and what exactly are those choices serving for us, as individuals, as families, as partners, as leaders, as organizations, then it's okay. And I'm optimistic that together, we can come out of this with more empathy and kindness, which for me are very important values to practice.
That's brilliant. Well, thank you, Jyoti, for joining us this morning. It's always a pleasure speaking to you, and thanks for being a part of the event. It's great to catch up again. It's been a while, and hopefully we can, maybe early next year come chat again and revisit some of these points and see kind of where we're up to. But it'd be great to chat again, and I appreciate you joining us.
I look forward to. Thank you, Chris.